All righty. Okay. Welcome to another Live with Dr. Rick and Relate Well. We're going to have a talk, and I'm calling this one Time to Grow Up. Time to Grow Up. How maturity and relationships actually kind of link together. All right. Now, our nation emotionally is adolescent. If you want to read some really good books about this, I encourage you to get Diane West's book. Her book is called The Death of the Grown-Up. The Death of the Grown-Up. The subtitle of the book is How America's Arrested Development is Bringing Down Western Civilization. Second book is by an author named Ben Sass. I think he's a senator now. His book is called The Vanishing American Adult. And so what you're actually seeing today in our country is a nation at the emotional level is very adolescent. You see, mature adults deal with conflict very differently than immature adults do. You see, I'm 59 years old. Chronologically, I'm 59, but emotionally, you can be a chronological adult, emotionally still a child, an infant, or an adolescent. And sadly, that's where most of our nation is. I mean, we know through research and studies and writings that mainly America is emotional children raising children. And you see, you can't raise your children to be something that you're not, because you can't give your kids something that you don't possess. Now, I grew up in a broken home with a divorce and abuse. Dad shocked with a cow prod. He had an anger issue. My stepmother was never affirming or loving. Now, she always, food, air, water, shelter were taken care of for us. But all the emotional needs that were a part of that are necessity of life weren't present. Okay. And so because my father was emotionally an adolescent, even to the day he died 37 years ago at age 47, and my stepmother, you can't raise your children to be something that you're not. You can't give somebody something if you don't possess it. So if you're not a mature adult, you can't raise your children to be mature adults because you don't have it to give them. All right? And by the way, you can be a brilliant rocket scientist or a biochemist. Intellect has nothing to do with maturity, folks. Maturity is development of the emotional brain, which is where we relate from. The left side, the neocortex, that's where you think from. You can be a brilliant thinker, but highly immature. You see, and because our nation is so immature, you look at the way we're dealing with conflict today between groups, between spouses, between boys and girls, between boyfriends and girlfriends. It's immature. It's destructive. And so we're going to have a conversation today around the idea of time to grow up. It is time to grow up. And so Eric Hoffer, who was a poet and a study, one who studied sociology and society, has a quote here. I like to read it to you. He wrote, "If a society is to preserve its stability and a degree of continuity, it must know now to keep its adolescents from imposing their tastes, attitudes, values, and fantasies on everyday life." Did you get that? If you want a healthy society, if you want a strong society, a mature society, then what these folks are saying, or what he is saying, is that society must know that adolescent values, attitudes, tastes, and fantasies being imposed on everyday life is actually destructive to the stability of that society. We'll take a look here at this a little bit deeper and where this comes from and what happened that got us here as a nation, okay? Listen to this quote by Diana West in her book, The Death of the Grown-Up. Listen to this. She writes, "Once there was a world without teenagers, literally." Did you get that? Literally. Teenager, the word itself doesn't pop up into the American lexicon much before 1941. In other words, prior to 1941, you didn't see the word teenager. It wasn't used, and if it was very, very rare. I'll continue the quote. This speaks volumes about the last few millennia. In all those many centuries, nobody thought to mention teenagers because there was nothing, apparently, to think of mentioning. Because throughout millennia, the period we call teenagers didn't exist. In considering what I like to call the death of the grown-up, it is important to keep a fix on this fact that for all but this most recent episode of human history, there were children and there were adults. Children in their teen years aspired to adulthood. Significantly, their parents didn't aspire to be adolescents. Do you get that? Adults did not aspire to remain teenagers. You see adult men and women dressing like teens today. You see adolescent and childish behaviors and conflict resolution and how we deal with anger. It's childish. Why? Because we have a society that wasn't taught how to deal with conflict in a mature way. I wasn't. When I got married 37 years ago, and I was a sailor in the United States Navy. All right, I'm in the military. And yet, at the emotional level, I was still a child. I didn't know that I didn't know I was a child, but I was very much a child and childish. You see, there is a difference between being childlike, which is actually healthy, and childish, which is not. Most adults today are childish. They're not childlike. Childlike is that healthy, mature adult who understands that being childlike is a positive thing. Being childlike means you can dream, you can have fantasies, you're playful, but you're still the adult. You know when to put those things away. As one writer put, when I was a child, I spoke and acted like a child. When I became a man, I put away those childish things. When do you become an adult in Western society? You ever thought about that? When do you become an adult in Western society? Well, it's simple. 18. It is a legal definition that when you turn 18, you now are classified as an adult. So now let's think about our laws for a minute. Ready? All right. Age 15 will let you drive a vehicle with supervision. 16, you can drive the vehicle without supervision. Age 18, you can vote. You can go into the military, and we will train you to kill the enemy. Actually, you can do a lot of things at age 18, right? You can even be involved in porn movies. Oh, by the way, though, we don't trust you to drink until you're 21. Wait a minute now. I can do all that other stuff at age 18, but I'm still not mature enough to drink. No, but I can do all that other stuff. Yes. But not drink. Yes. And now you can't smoke, but I can do all that other stuff. If you just think about our laws don't even tell you when you become an adult. The West is the only culture that does not have a rite of passage from childhood to adulthood. Just because you hit age 18 doesn't emotionally, you are an adult. Just because you're 25 doesn't make you an adult. You see, throughout world history, you were a child, and then on a particular day, you left childhood and you became a man. You became an adult woman, an adult man. Now, borrowing from my Jewish heritage, I gave my kids a version of a bar mitzvah. In other words, the word teenager was not allowed in my house because I said, look, teenager is not a way of being. Teenager is just how long you've been alive, right? I don't go around calling myself a 59-ager. So I'm not going to call you a teenager. That's just how long you've been alive, all right? If we call them teenagers, why don't we call them 20-agers and 30-agers and 40-agers? We don't do that. And so, oh, hang on, I got to take care of this issue over here. Sorry about that, folks. I've got my Instagram over here on this camera, and I've got everything else on that one. And Instagram is actually on my phone, and somebody's calling through, so it put the folks on Instagram on pause, and I had to delete that phone call out. and let it go to voicemail. Now, back to the topic. I gave my kids a version of a bar mitzvah because I wanted my kids to know that as of today, you've entered into adulthood. That yesterday you weren't, today you are. Now, I never called them teenagers or adolescents. I didn't use those terms. They are young men and young women. Now, I can't expect a 13-year-old brain to act like an 18-year-old brain. That would be rather immature on my part to assume that a brain that's been around 13 years can act like an 18-year-old brain. It won't do it. It just does what 13-year-old brains do. You see, and I told my kids, look, I expect you to act your age. I don't expect you at 10 or 12. You already did that year. Let's not do it again, right? Just because I'm 59, if I'm still acting like an 8-year-old or a 9-year-old or a 15-year-old or a 16-year-old or a 21-year-old, that's immaturity. You got to grow up. And so this talk is really about looking at that, all right? Listen, let me give you some statistics to show you what I'm talking about. All right. A Cartoon Network, all right? More adults than children actually watch Cartoon Network, according to CNN. Get that? A network for children is watched more by adults. All right. Next. More adults in their mid to late 20s purchase young adult fiction written for teens. In 1990, the average video gamer was 18. Today, the average age of video gamer is 30. Adult men are letting video games destroy their marriages. Why? I like the way Ron Tier out of Ohio puts it. They're chronological adults. The chronological adults with little boy issues. In 2002, listen, this is interesting. Listen, folks, you'll find this fascinating. In 2002, the National Academy of Science redefined adolescence and said it goes from puberty to age 30. There are organizations that are trying to push adolescents back to 30 years old, folks. The MacArthur Foundation declared that adolescence actually goes until you're 34. Almost half of your life, they're suggesting, assuming you get, live be 60 and beyond, almost half of your life is spent as an adolescent. It gives some meaning to what Eric Hoffer was saying in that quote, that when a nation, when a culture defines its values, its beliefs, its attitudes on adolescent ways of thinking, its stability and its ability to function well is compromised. Listen to this one. 1/3 of the 56 million Americans, listen, you're going to find this interesting. 1/3 of the 56 million Americans watching SpongeBob SquarePants. Each month in 2002, it's the data. This is a show for 6 to 11-year-olds. Got it? A show for 6 to 11-year-olds. 1/3 of the 56 million Americans who watch that show are between the ages of 18 and 49. And by the way, you want to know how much we value this idea of being an adult and being a child, a teenager? What was the most popular sitcom over the last decade? It was called Big Bang Theory. Here you have a show of Ivy League intellectual, brilliant young men who act nothing more than adolescent. And we honored that show. We laughed at that show. But I think the show is telling of where we are and what we're valuing today. It's where we are and what we value today, because we've lost our ability to be an adult nation emotionally. Again, you can't raise somebody something that you're not. You only raise people to be what you are, because you can't give somebody something if you don't have it. And so when I got married 37 years ago, emotionally, I was a child. My wife was probably more of an emotional teenager. We didn't have healthy, mature adults to raise us to be mature adults. And so we had to grow up as adults, chronological adults. And I'm grateful that I did, because I had two motivations for it. One, I didn't want to live life stupid and dumb and pass on a generational brokenness that was in the Marx's and Llewellyn side of the family. We were going to stop it. But to do that, we had to grow up and become healthy, mature adults. And secondly, I would not be able to raise mature adult children if I wasn't one myself. Got it? I wanted to be able to give them something they needed, but I had to have it and possess it and own it first and be able to live it out in order to give it to them, you see. And so when you think about how people deal with conflict, yelling, screaming, throwing things, hitting, sulking, whining, guilty with the sulking and the whining. It's what I did in those early days of marriage. It's the best I had based on what I was raised with, you see. But it didn't endear Llewellyn to me at all, because it was childish. It's just what children do, you see. And so we have to grow up and become healthy, mature adults. So here's the key. So you can love maturely, because you can't love maturely if you're not mature. And when does this part of you start to show up? Let's be honest. Infants, children, and adolescents, when they're happy, they're great to be around. It's the moment they're not getting their needs met or getting what they want is when the problem shows up. You see what I mean? And so this part of you, this Darth Vader part of you, is going to show up when you're not getting your way. That's what I did. I'm not proud of it, but I'm willing to be honest with you with integrity to tell you I wasn't a mature adult. I handled things in really childish ways. I'd sulk and whine, complain, just to punish her for not giving me affection, or to punish her for not doing what I wanted. I'm not proud of it, but it's what I did. All right. So how did we get here? Well, here's some theories of how we got here as a nation. All right. One theory had to do, because of the breakdown of family and the breakdown of marriages, the more and more marriages you have, it inspires more childish behaviors, some research says, right? So second marriages and more marriages that actually encourages childish behaviors, adolescent behaviors, immature stuff, all right? That's one reason we got here, some theories. Another is that when you have an affluent nation, think about the 50s, 60s, 70s, affluence, right? With little to no deprivation. When you have affluence with little to no deprivation, listen, nobody wants to hurt today. Our country went to war, but nobody in this country felt it economically like they did in World War II. Nobody felt anything about it. When there's affluence and little deprivation, some research points out, this also will inspire childish behavior. I want what I want, an entitlement attitude, which I would argue in our nation today, we got a whole group of adults that are entitled, young adults. All right. Third theory is that we've had a permissive society since the 1960s and beyond. I'm going to do what I want, right? Free love, free sex, do drugs, do alcohol, smoke weed. No one's going to tell me what I can't do and can't do, what I can do and can't do. So I'm going to do what I want. So much so, we're now looking at legalizing the things that we used to say were illegal and unhealthy for you. Why? Because I want what I want. I want to do what I want. Okay. A permissive society. Next, anxiety about societal change. I mean, let's be honest. Remember when you were about to graduate high school and there was a part of you that was nervous about going into the adult world, having to work, go to college, earn a living? I remember that. Of course, I joined the Navy, so it made a little bit of security there, because let's be honest, military provides a lot of security for you in some ways. But there's anxiety about societal change and social change. Another one is we have a real nostalgia for being youth and youthful. Everybody wants to stop aging. We want to look younger, you know. A lot of people doing a lot of reconstruction on themselves to make them look younger. Why? Because we're afraid of aging. We're afraid to admit that we're just getting older. And when you get older, there are changes that take place. That's the world. That's life. Get used to it. Political correctness has also contributed, because political correctness is an emotion-driven decision-making process. We decide based on what you feel. You don't decide based on what's rational and logical. Get it? So if I feel like the guy in, I think it was Holland quite a few years ago, he's 47 years old, by the way, had a wife and kids. He felt that he was a 6-year-old little girl because he felt that he was a 6-year-old little girl. Then he began to live as a 6-year-old little girl. I think he had a family that adopted him as a 6-year-old little girl for their 6-year-old little girl. And to logically, rationally ask the question, are you really a 6-year-old girl, would be considered offensive, you're a hater, those kind of things. It's a logical question, but in political correctness, elevated a lower order animal brain, which is the emotional brain, because animals have primal emotions as well, but only humans have a well-developed neocortex, a prefrontal cortex, which is a thinking brain. We have to think about what we feel and ask questions about it to see if it's logical and rational in reality. Political correctness says, no, if I feel it, it must be real, you see. And that's youthful thinking. That's the way children think. And lastly, capitalism actually helped bring us to this place, because since the 1950s, one of the things that capitalism was doing after the war, there's an affluent society, people are building homes, there's a wealth of kids being born, companies want to make money. So here's what companies started doing. They started marketing directly to children. Now, why would they do that? Children don't produce. They're consumers, all right? They don't produce. They don't have income. If they have income, they get it from who? Mom and dad. But when you start marketing, right, directly to children, and children say, mommy, I want to go to that restaurant. They got a clown. They've got this. They've got that. Mom and daddy take them. And that happened. And so it began a society that became child-centric rather than adult-centric. All right. Not here to judge the theory, just kind of lay them out there for you. And so listen to this here. There's an economic shift for the family as well. Listen to what I wrote here. Prior to the industrial society, families were big and agrarian. Children and youth worked farms and provided for the economic well-being of the family. Post-industrial, and in particular post-Great Depression, children do not provide economic for family and are consumers of what mom and dad provide. Youth, more involved institutions from kindergarten to colleges started to show up, all right? And so prior to a pre-industrial society, children throughout history were always seen as little adults, tiny adults, all right? Children worked from young age and were viewed as economic assets. That's why big families exist. You were a farm. Listen, my dad had us kids working in his shop. He bought and sold heavy equipment, Caterpillar. He had us working in his shop when I was probably about 8 and 9. All right. I mean, when I was like 9 years old, I can tell you what size bolt was, a nut was, whether it's fine thread, coarse thread. Because when all that stuff would come in, I had to put them in the bins. Right. It's one of the things I did, clean up oil. But I also got to drive my first bulldozer when I was 9 years old, and my first front end loader when I was 9 years old, and learned to do some arc welding. Not really good at it, but I learned to do it as a kid. And I learned how to use a cutting torch when I was a child. We learned those things as a kid. All right. My dad had us working, learning responsibility. All right. I wrote here, children worked from a young age and were viewed as economic assets. They brought in money and helped support the family. Children joined in similar leisure activities as adults. And by the way, prior to the pre-industrial society, children could be punished for criminal offenses just as an adult would be. They were tried as adults. After we moved to the 40s, teenager, adolescents start showing up, we now start to treat them differently. All right. I'm not here to argue for or against it. All right. It's not what my point is. I'm just going to give you some what some of the research is out there showing. So what is immaturity? What is immaturity? It's being emotionally underdeveloped. It's being emotionally undeveloped. It's being childish and juvenile. So what is mature? This is when you're complete in your natural growth and development. And that doesn't mean biological, all right, that you've gone through puberty, et cetera, et cetera. This also has to do with development of the emotional part of the brain, which is known as the limbic system, all right? That part of your brain must fully develop itself as well. Now, I grew up in a broken home where that didn't happen. I had to learn to do that as an adult in my early 20s, early 30s, all right? And so is it possible then to come to full development physically and intellectually, but not emotionally? The answer is yes. Yes, it is. Again, I quoted Ron Tier earlier, as he said, we have basically adult men with little boy issues still. And that's what pervades our society. And so let's take a look then of what is the remedy to this thing. Well, some people call it emotional intelligence in Daniel Goleman's book. I like the word emotional wellness. They have a little bit of definition. So let me give the definition for you. Emotional intelligence is the capacity to be aware of, the self-awareness, to control and express one's emotions, and to handle interpersonal relationships, listen, judiciously and empathetically. The capacity to be aware of, control, and express one's emotions, and to handle interpersonal relationships judiciously and empathetically. One of the things that I use, and it's a core part of our Relate Well program, are what we call the 4 protectors of the relationship. But really, those 4 protectors were the 4 words I began to regulate myself by for many, many years, and they helped me become a healthy, mature adult. And if you're wondering if I really am, my wife said I am last October, so it must be. She would know. All right. Now, the 4 words that we want people to live by is a way of being. That's the phrase, as a way of being, is goodwill, respect, humility, and empathy. To live a life of goodwill, respect, humility, and empathy requires maturity. Immature people in conflict move to pride and defensiveness. Mature people in conflict stay in humility, because mature adults, in essence, are humble people. And to live a life of humility is powerful. And when you live a life of humility, you will treat people with goodwill, respect, and empathy. Now, that's the definition of emotional intelligence: the capacity to be aware of, control, and express one's emotions, and to handle interpersonal relationships judiciously and empathetically. Our Relate Well curriculum, the online platform, we actually teach people how to do that. We give you the skills and tools of how to speak your truth in a loving way, how to be slow to anger and quick to hear what someone else is saying. We teach you emotional regulation skills, how to regulate that part of your brain known as the limbic system. And you have to use a higher order rational mind to do that. We teach you how to bond and how to connect in healthy, mature ways. Now listen to the definition of emotional wellness. Emotional wellness is the ability to successfully handle life's stresses and adapt to change in difficult times. So emotional intelligence is really about my ability to have self-awareness and self-control, and to regulate myself in relationships judiciously and empathetically. The definition of emotional wellness is similar. It's the ability to successfully handle life's stresses. That you're able, because you're a healthy, mature person, to deal with life stresses in a mature manner, and that you have the ability to adapt. You see, life is about flexibility, all right? You can't, if you have too much structure, that's unhealthy. If you have no structure, that's unhealthy. It's the good balance in the middle, right? Blessed are the balanced, as some say. And you are able to adapt to change in difficult times. Now, I found this interesting. There are psychiatric diagnoses here in the United States that are given to us in the DSM-5 5th edition. The DSM is the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual 5th edition. It's the Bible basically for all mental illness diagnoses. It's put out by the American Psychiatric Association. All right. But there's another one out there, and these are the ISD classifications. These are the psychiatric diagnoses put out by the World Health Organization for the global level. So this diagnosis I'm about to tell you about doesn't exist in America, but it does exist at the international level. Listen up. Immature personality disorder, IPD. Immaturity is now officially an ailment listed in the World Health Organization's International Statistical Classification of Diseases and Related Health Problems, 10th revision. The condition is akin to other impulse control disorders, such as things like oppositional defiant disorder or intermittent explosive disorder or disruptive impulse control disorder. Remember, it is not a diagnosis, though, here in America. All right. It's not a diagnosis here. So what is this thing called immature personality disorder and its symptoms? Listen to what I have here. Many IPD sufferers are not able. Oh, by the way, if this resonates for you, we won't say that you have IPD because it's not a diagnosis here, but it is kind of telling you you've got an immature personality. Now, listen, if I read this and you go, that's me, as I had to do many years ago, I go, okay, so what? You know, you're immature. Matters is not that you are. What matters now is what are you going to do about it? If you stay that way, they're just proving your immaturity. Mature people want to transform themselves to become better, healthy, mature adults so they can love well and relate well. All right. So let me go on and read these now. Many IPD sufferers are not able to deal with everyday events without becoming emotional, angry, or they shut down and are neglectful, like an angry adolescent rebelling against mom by slamming the door of their room. Kids don't preempt consequences easily and cannot take too much responsibility. When things don't go their way, they sulk, blame, or lie. Mood swings are a common symptom of immature personality disorder. Adults with this disorder are prone to bully and violate the rights of others and create conflict. There is an evident lack of sympathy and empathy. There is also an abundance of the lack of self-control. Get that? They really lack self-control. Many adults with IPD overeat, they drink, do drugs, medicate themselves, or sexually act out in inappropriate ways. While grown-ups have learned the hard way to make judgments before talking or making important decisions. In other words, there's an old Jewish proverb that says, a fool, immature, a fool appears wise when he keeps his mouth shut. See, I used to think that if I thought something, then I needed to share it. I found out that's pretty immature. Mature people know that some things that you think and feel should not be shared. It's unwise. While grown-ups have learned the hard way to make judgments before talking or making important decisions, using their executive brain functions to assess consequence, children often do silly things or blurt out hurtful things. They don't delay gratification. I want it now. They can be petulant. They snatch other people's toys. They name call and throw sand at each other. Throw toys. They hit. Mature people don't live that way. Mature people are not that way. You see, it is possible to be a chronological adult and highly, highly immature. And I think one of the primary pieces of this is the role of the family. It's the role, again, emotional children raising children, right? You can't raise somebody to be something that you're not. You only give people what you have, right? And so the primary social space for our biopsychosocial spiritual development is the family. Now, if you grew up in a very loving, nurturing, tender home, you be grateful. You honor that, you be grateful. However, let me also point out to you, you're abnormal. You're not the norm. Most people are not growing up in those homes today. 66% of families today are basically single parent and or step families. All right. And of the 1/3 of families that are together, 42% of those were divorced. All right. So even first married families aren't that healthy and mature. All right. Healthy, mature people create very strong, loving, healthy marriages and families. All right. It's just the way it works. And so we learn about how to interact with the world. How? By the way that we were treated. You learn it by what you watched and what you saw modeled. I just got done doing an intensive with a couple, and the way her family dealt with conflict was yelling and screaming. Highly immature, but that's what they did. And she brought that pattern into her adult life where she was yelling and screaming at her husband over the years. And it's taken its toll on him. He's told her to stop. His family didn't do that. But that's how they did it. That's what her brain knows, because she was never taught how to deal with conflict in a mature way. You see, you learn about how to relate, how to develop yourself at the emotional level by the way you were treated. And if you weren't treated in a healthy, loving way, then you didn't get the healthy messages that you needed to be a healthy, mature person. And I've come to learn this, all right? All humans have to have 4 questions answered in a positive way early in life. And if these are answered positively early in life and you're secure in these, then you really become a healthy, mature adult. And here's the 4 questions. Am I lovable? Do I matter? Do I have value? And do I have something to offer the world? Do I have a purpose, or am I just existing? And when people are secure that they're lovable and they're loved and that they matter, that they have value and they have purpose, those are mature people. And because they're mature, because they're secure in those 4 questions, they're secure in those 4 questions. They're then able to go give to others. All right? I had to learn all that after I left home. I had to learn all this by mentors and teachers that came into my life because my parents didn't have it. So I had to go get it from other people. And I'm grateful that God put people in my life so that I could. And let's be honest, when your relational needs are met, when you feel valued, when you feel comforted and you get attention, you get acceptance, you feel approved, you feel respect, you feel appreciated, you get encouragement, right? You're secure, you feel supported. Those are core relational needs that are hardwired into the emotional brain. And just like food, air, water, shelter, they must be met and will be met. And when those needs are met, you thrive as an individual. You're able to be slow to anger. You're able to listen well. You move to compassion and conflict rather than defensiveness and guardedness, you see. And so it took me a while to get there. I'm not saying I did it overnight, but life is about maturing, isn't it? I'm more mature than I was 10 years ago than I was 20 years, but I'm not really what I want to be today. But 10 years, I'll get there, because maturity is a lifelong journey. And if you're sitting there going, well, Rick, I'm in my 30s or 40s and I am this immature person, I do those things. I go, okay, then start growing up. Well, I don't know how. Relate Well will give you the fundamentals to get there. We actually teach you how to regulate your brain so that even if you're the emotional child, if you do what we say, if you do the skills, in a sense, you'll be an emotional child acting like an adult. That's what I was. Back in those early days, I was an emotional child acting like a mature adult. And because I valued what I learned, I used those things regularly. I made them a part of my soul. Why? Because now I wanted to become that person as a way of being, and I did over time, you see. And here's the thing. If those healthy relational needs are met, then you feel valued, feel like you matter. What is the outcome of meeting relational needs so that people feel valued and they feel worthy, they feel acceptable, all of that, all right? Those people actually, over time, begin to think in healthy ways. And because they think in healthy ways, they also emotionally mature. They have positive feelings, mostly, not negative feelings. Because they think in healthy ways and they are emotionally mature, they have healthy, mature emotions, mostly, then they make mature choices. They might say, you know what? I'm angry, it would not be wise or mature on my part to yell and scream right now. And they're able to think that through. And that leads to positive outcomes. What are these positive outcomes? These are interdependent people. They're self-aware. They have self-control and self-management. They operate from humility and they're very respectful. Excuse me. However, if those relational needs were not met in your life growing up, and you went through life feeling that you didn't have value, that you didn't matter, that creates a sense of dissatisfaction with life and oneself. That creates a sense of angst. It wounds the heart, and you go into the adult world with a wounded heart. But early on, your brain's trying to make sense of it. And because you never got those needs met, your brain's thinking, well, then I guess I'm not loved, or I'm not lovable, and I maybe not worthy, maybe I'm not adequate, then maybe I'm not good enough, and maybe I'm unlovable, and I'm not chosen, and I'm weak. It leads to unhealthy thinking when you don't meet those relational needs. And those unhealthy thinking patterns lead to an emotional arrested state. Did you get that? You become emotionally arrested. You get stuck in an infant, child, or adolescent state. And because you're emotionally stuck at that state, you're going to make immature choices, particularly in conflict. And what does that do? It produces negative outcomes for your life. Addictions, controlling. You could be a bully, abusive. You're whining. You're either way too independent or you're too dependent. You start to take from other people just to get your needs met because you're so afraid that you won't get your needs met because you don't believe that you're lovable. All of that, when we didn't care enough to meet the needs of our children early in life. But if you didn't have them met yourself, you can't meet them for someone else. I think you're getting the idea here of what it's really like. And so we need to begin to live as healthy, mature adults, not as an infant. An emotional infant is a tyrant. An emotional infant operates this way. I want what I want, and you're nothing more than I'll just give me what I want. They'll bully the heck out of you. You're not allowed to have any thoughts or feelings that don't center on me. Everything you do centers on me. You're not allowed to have your own sense of self. You're about me. That's an infantile adult. A childish adult operates, well, I have needs and wants, and you have what I need, so I got to take it from you. So I whine, I sulk, I threaten, I punish you. I'll charm you, I'll sulk, I'll suck up to you to get what I want when I want it. If you don't, then I'm going to bully you or threaten you. I don't love you. I don't want to care about you anymore. I'm going to divorce you. It's childish, but it's the best you have. Or you operate from an adolescent adult mindset, which basically says, I don't need anything. And if I do, I can do it myself. And when you criticize me, my brain hears it as if you're treating me like a child. Though you're not. That's how my brain hears it. And you're not going to control me. So I'm going to go to my room and play my video games or go to the bar or go do this because you're not going to control me. And I'm going to take a lot of risks because no one's going to tell me what to do. And that's not what mature adults are. You know what a mature adult is? Listen to this. Mature adults have the ability to deal with relationships with compassion and cooperation, even in conflict. They can listen and hear your thoughts and feelings without demanding, rebelling, manipulating, or controlling you. Mature adults have the ability to speak their truths, in a loving, goodwill, respectful way. And this is really important. They will actually share their truths about what they see in their relationship as well. Because faithful are the wounds of a friend, as an old proverb says. And here's a real big thing about mature adults. Mature adults can enter into your emotional struggles, even if they're intense, and they won't personalize it. Immature adults take things personal. Mature adults do not. They're able to live in that separation. You see, this is a more powerful way to live life. So we want to live a life that says we're mature adults. So what are some of the hallmarks of maturity? Here we go. Hallmarks of maturity. You can live fully in the present. You can emotionally separate issues from the past and their fears and insecurities to be present to themselves, which is considered mindfulness in their others, and they can be there for others. Mature adults, they do not live in isolation and an emotional posture of self-reliance. They understand and embrace their God-ingrained need for connection in interpersonal relations. They maintain a sense of humor and do not take life too seriously. They can laugh at themselves and allow for mishaps, mistakes, and errors for themselves and others. And they don't turn these things into resentments, bitterness, or grudges. And here's another key hallmark of maturity. They're appreciative and they're grateful. Did you get that? They live a life of appreciation and gratefulness. They intentionally live with a posture of gratitude, and they find things to appreciate in others and in their situations. And they live more with a heart of gratitude than a heart of criticism. They live life in humility, recognizing that pride and selfishness only causes more heartache and grief. They understand that to live in humility is to live powerfully. The hallmarks of maturity also means that these people are compassionate and caring. By the way, this requires self-compassion on your part, because your self-compassion will inhibit you from being judgmental and critical. Mature adults forgive and seek forgiveness. They think rationally. They do not deny their emotion and accept them as they are. Yet they do not make decisions based on these emotions. You get that? Let me read it again. Mature adults, they think rationally. They do not deny their emotions. They accept them as they are. Yet they do not make decisions based on those emotions. They understand healthy, mature decisions require healthy thinking and rationality. And lastly, they live a life based on respecting oneself and others, as well as making their choices and actions based on having goodwill towards others. You imagine living life that way and relating to people that way? What a powerful way to live your life. What a more meaningful way to live your life. Because when we can live this way, fully this way, we are living in the fullness of everything you're supposed to be and become, what God wants to bring out of you. And by the way, let's be honest, I'm 59. What point am I going to grow up? I did a long time ago. And I'm glad I did. Because in this way, I live a lot more peacefully. I'm not bothered by things. I don't run from issues. I deal with them, but I deal with them in a mature way. I don't control things and try and make Luella do things. But I can handle things in a healthy, mature way. And that makes life meaningful. It makes life secure. It makes life peaceful. And that's how I choose to live my life. Well, it's Dr. Rick. Hoping maybe in some small way, this has challenged you and made you think. If you want more information or learn how to do it, go to relatewell.us. Check out our core program. It is designed to give you the skills and tools to get you where you need to be. All right? Have a great day, everyone. Blessings.